Greetings and salutations. Welcome back. Today's video is going to be a little bit different. It's going to be less of a build video and more of a repair video. So first off, I'm going to warn any of my viewers. If you have seen my Knife or Death episode, specifically Season 2, Episode 9, and you don't want spoilers, pause the movie, or pause this video, go watch it, and then come on back. I'll give you a second to do that. Okay, so if you're still here, I assume that you don't care about spoilers or you have seen the video. So what I'm doing today is I am going to be repairing one of the swords from that episode. The episode that I filmed was actually one of the first episodes that they filmed, so they were still working the kinks out of some of the trials that you're going to go through, and you will notice on some of those that those trials were a bit hard on the swords. We lost 2 swords on that episode, and I think 4 out of the 7, maybe 5 out of the 7 people actually slipped and fell on the floor. So you'll actually get to see me do that. But one of the contestants, John, he actually had this sword right here, and he wanted me to fix it. So this is the sword. It's an interesting sword. It has a threaded pommel. I may have to do this out of order. But this is the sword. You'll notice that it's an Egyptian Khopesh, so it has this little pull right here. But the biggest thing is this big curve. Okay, this big curve that was put into the sword. Anytime you're dealing with chopping and a curved sword, you're going to run into some flexing issues. And specifically on the show, you can see all of the swords, they flexed a lot because the obstacles are not designed to be cut with swords. Or knives, you know, they're designed to be axes. The PVC pipes, the very first one that took out a sword, those are filled with rocks. Okay, so it's a big PVC pipe filled with gravel. And unfortunately, when we took it, they were really filled with gravel. In later episodes, they didn't fill them quite so high. But on the very first chop, this sword dug into the wood, and you can see this tip right here, it flexes a little bit, and that actually starts it. And that's the biggest problem that you have with a curved blade, is this curve right here. When you hit with the edge, this curve wants to bend over. And when you're coming in with a solid chop, even if you hit solid, if your angle, if you're not completely straight behind your force, this is going to flex a little bit. The more weight is on the tip right here, the more that it flexes. And if you guys see this, all right, so you can see this has a really hefty point right here. So there's a lot of meat on this tip right here. And because there's a lot of meat on this tip right here, when you combine that with the force that John swings, it was not going to last. And it took a little bit of a bend on his very first nick, and then you'll notice later on he just beats it to the point that it turns into this little pretzel. Now it was bent a lot more than this on the show. He had straightened it out a little bit so he can mail it to me, and today we're going to straighten it out even further. Why did it bend? It wasn't just the shape. The shape led to it, but the temper is ultimately why a sword will bend. So you want a little bit more information about a temper, go ahead and check out Sam Town's videos. Link them here or here. He goes into it a lot better than I can. But ultimately it leads to, you have 3 areas that a sword can get. You can have too hard, in which case it shatters, it breaks. So every time you see a broken sword that was cutting and it broke, that was because it was tempered too hard. Or it bends, like this one, which means it was tempered too soft. Or it flexes, like mine did, and that means the temper is basically just right. Mine did take a minor set. To give you an idea, this one's mine. It is completely unaltered from the show. You can see it has a very minor set. So we've got a bend right about here, which is where I was hitting it. I mean, if you look at the edge, damn, still sharp. If you look at the edge, that's mostly where it took 90% of its abuse. Yeah, that right there is really my only major dull spot. So the funny thing is that this sword and this sword, I believe, are the same steel. Yeah, and all that is it's two things. First thing that contributes to that is obviously the steel, but if they're both the same steel, secondary thing that contributes to whether or not a sword bends, breaks, or just saunters through like nothing, is the tempering process, that hardening and tempering. So you can quench it, it goes crazy hard, and so you can sharpen it. And then you draw that temper back, you heat it back up and take away some of that hardness. You find that sweet spot, and it's a beautiful blade. But it's like balancing on a knife edge. You have to get it exactly right. Too hard, too soft, and it doesn't necessarily do what you want. And Knife or Death is a brutal show. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna take this, and first attempt is we're gonna try and take off this tang, and then we're gonna try and take off the handle, and then we're gonna heat it up. So let's get started. All right, step one. Let's get this handle off. All right, so the sword is basically just setting on there. The only thing the vise is doing is keeping this up. And that's not working. I'm guessing this whole thing is epoxied in there, in which case nothing is going to get it out short of ow. Well, I am thinking that we're gonna have to heat it up. Okay, so as you can see, nothing. It is still completely enclosed. There is no gap, there is no movement in the sword. The nut, or not the nut, but the handle has not moved at all. Now I didn't damage the screw, and I had no intentions of doing so. So that is good. It's not mushroomed, which is also good. But we got zero movement. So that means that this entire handle here was epoxied onto this blade. Great for longevity, and the fact that the handle didn't break off under the extreme stress that the sword went into, but bad when we're trying to repair it. So I'm gonna have to put the entire blade in the forge to about here and heat it all up, trying not to scorch this, but let the heat travel down. This will probably get completely red hot, and the heat will travel down all the way and hopefully burn out the epoxy, or at least loosen it up. I don't know what epoxy they used. I'm gonna assume that it is toxic, so lots of ventilation, and I'll probably be wearing a respirator at the same time. So, yay fun. Trying to get the handle off. As you can tell, the epoxy is really, really strong. I don't think the handle's gonna make it. So, looks like the handle may have burned off entirely. We will see. Let that heat up, let the heat travel all the way down to the pin. prying the handle off. That is how you get off an unstuck handle. As it was epoxied on, that's really the only way to get it off. Alright. Normalizing. little hot too. Ow, shit. He's sharp. I don't know if you guys can see that. We've got a pretty uniform straw color all the way down the edge, which is kind of what I'm looking for. It's a cutting sword, so it should be that. Well, that's fixing the sword. So I want to thank everybody for showing up and watching. I hope you liked it. If you're interested in seeing the episode where this actually gets to where it was at the beginning of this video, check out Knife or Death on the History channel. You'll see me, you'll see my friend JP, who is the one that actually used this sword, and yeah, I hope you enjoy it. So please like, share, subscribe. If you'd like to send me anything or donate anything, links are down below. I hope you have a great time, and I'll see you later. Peace out.